Rain fell like cold needles from the dark sky. The streets of Willow Creek were almost empty, except for one man sitting on a wooden bench beside the old fountain. His name was Ethan Cole. His coat was soaked. His hands shook. But he didn't move. He just stared at the water, watching the ripples spread and fade like everything in his life. 3 days ago, he had a job. He had friends. He had someone who said she loved him. Now, he had nothing. People in Willow Creek whispered his name like it was a curse. Ethan Cole, the liar. Ethan Cole, the thief. Stay away from him. He wasn't guilty. But no one wanted to listen. That morning, Ethan had gone to his workplace, a small construction company, to prove his innocence. Someone had stolen money from a project, and the blame fell on him. He begged his boss, Mr. Harris, to check the records. But Mr. Harris only sighed. "Ethan, I trusted you. But I can't take chances. You're done here." Those words cut deeper than any knife. Ethan had worked for that company for 7 years. He had given everything: long nights, broken bones, missed birthdays. And just like that, it was all gone. He called his friends. No one answered. He went to his parents' house. The door stayed closed. Even his girlfriend, Amanda, looked at him like a stranger when he showed up at her door. "I can't do this, Ethan," she said quietly. "I can't be with someone everyone hates." And she closed the door too. Now, he sat alone in the park as the world moved on without him. People passed by, some looked at him, most didn't. He was invisible. A small boy threw a rock into the fountain. "Mom, who's that man?" "Don't look," the woman said. "He made bad choices." Ethan smiled weakly. Bad choices? Maybe his only mistake was trusting people too much. The rain got heavier. His clothes clung to his skin. His shoes filled with mud. But he didn't care. He had nowhere to go. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt what it truly meant to be left behind. Night fell slowly. Street lights flickered on, painting the wet road in soft gold. The park was empty now. Only Ethan remained, his head down, eyes half closed. He whispered, "Guess this is it." His voice broke. He thought about leaving town, disappearing forever. Maybe no one would even notice. He stood up, ready to walk away, when a small sound stopped him. Footsteps. Soft, quick, careful. A young woman was walking toward him, holding a red umbrella. Her coat was too thin for the cold, and her shoes splashed in the puddles. She looked about his age, maybe mid-20s. Her brown hair was tied in a messy bun, and her face was calm, but her eyes were full of quiet strength. She stopped a few steps away. "You shouldn't be sitting here in the rain," she said gently. Ethan blinked, confused. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," she said, stepping closer. "Your lips are blue. You're freezing." He gave a short laugh. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." The girl smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why I care." She opened her umbrella wider and held it above both of them. Ethan wanted to move away, but something in her voice, soft but steady, kept him there. They stood in silence for a moment, rain pattering against the umbrella. Finally, she spoke again. "My name's Grace Miller. I live nearby. There's a small cafe still open. Come with me. You need something warm to eat." He hesitated. "You don't even know what people say about me." Grace's eyes didn't waver. "I don't listen to rumors. I look at people." Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in months: disbelief mixed with warmth. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to tell her to leave him alone. But his stomach growled, and his heart was too tired to fight anymore. So, he followed. They walked under the same umbrella through quiet streets. Grace didn't ask questions. She didn't talk about the past. She just walked beside him, slow, steady, unafraid. Inside the cafe, the smell of coffee and bread filled the air. Grace ordered 2 cups of hot chocolate and a bowl of soup. Ethan tried to speak, but the words stuck. He hadn't shared a meal with anyone in weeks. Grace smiled as she pushed the bowl toward him. "Eat. You look like you haven't in days." He obeyed silently. Every spoonful felt like a small piece of life returning. After a while, he said quietly, "Why are you doing this?" Grace looked out the window. Rain still fell outside. "Because once, I sat where you are now. Alone. And someone helped me too." Ethan's eyes softened. He wanted to ask more, but she stood up and took her umbrella. She turned to him and said with a small smile, "Everyone leaves? But I don't." Then she walked toward the door, leaving the sound of rain and the faint smell of hope behind. Ethan sat there, staring after her, confused, grateful, and afraid to believe. For the first time in months, he felt something stir inside him, something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the small cafe window. Ethan Cole opened his eyes slowly. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. He was lying on a small couch near the corner, covered with a soft blanket. The smell of coffee and baked bread filled the air. Then he heard a voice. "Good morning," said Grace Miller, standing behind the counter with a gentle smile. Ethan sat up quickly. I didn't mean to fall asleep here." Grace shook her head. "It's fine. You look tired. I didn't want to wake you." He rubbed his eyes. "You could have just thrown me out." Grace laughed softly. "That's not really my style." It was quiet after that. Ethan watched her move around the cafe, cleaning tables, wiping the counter, humming softly. There was a peace about her that didn't match the noise of the world outside. He felt out of place, like a broken thing sitting in a perfect picture. After a while, Grace placed a plate in front of him, 2 eggs, toast, and coffee. "I don't have money," Ethan said quickly. She sat across from him. "I didn't ask for money." Ethan stared at the food for a long moment before eating. Every bite felt like a reminder that someone still cared. When he was done, Grace spoke softly. "You said people left you. That must have been hard." Ethan froze. "You don't need to hear my problems." Grace smiled a little. "Maybe not. But sometimes it helps to talk." He sighed. "It doesn't matter. They made their choice." She nodded. "And you made yours. You're still here. That means something." Ethan looked down. No one had said words like that to him before. As the day went on, Ethan helped her clean up. He didn't know why, maybe guilt, maybe gratitude. But when she smiled and said thank you, something inside him softened. Later that afternoon, Grace sat by the window with a cup of tea. "You can stay here for a few days," she said quietly. "Until you figure things out." Ethan blinked. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she replied. "You're kind, even if you don't believe it." He didn't know what to say. The world had thrown him away, but somehow, this stranger saw something still worth saving. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat near the window, watching the moonlight dance across the floor. The cafe was silent except for the ticking of a small wall clock. He thought about his life, his father's disappointment, his mother's silence, Amanda's cold goodbye. He thought about how easily everyone walked away. And then he thought about Grace. Why did she help him? What did she want? Nobody gives kindness without a reason, right? He looked over at her. She was asleep on a small chair, her face calm, a book still open in her hand. For the first time in months, Ethan smiled. Just a little. Morning came again, bright and calm. Grace was already awake, making breakfast. "You can help me today," she said. "I need someone to fix the shelves." Ethan hesitated. "I'm not staying long." "Then you can help before you go," she replied, teasing lightly. He laughed softly. "You're really not going to take no for an answer, are you?" "Nope." Hours passed. They worked together, him repairing shelves, her arranging pastries and coffee cups. The cafe slowly started to look alive again. At one point, Ethan dropped a box of sugar and groaned. Grace laughed so hard she nearly cried. It felt strange laughing again. He had forgotten what that even sounded like. In the afternoon, while cleaning, Ethan noticed something on the counter, a letter inside a glass frame. It was old, the ink slightly faded. Curious, he read the first line. "To my brother, if I ever find someone like you again, I'll make sure they never feel alone." Ethan froze. His heart beat faster. Grace came over quietly. "You found it?" He looked at her, confused. "Your brother?" She nodded slowly. "He died 3 years ago. Car accident. He was the kindest person I knew. Always helping people, even when he was struggling himself." Ethan looked down. "I'm sorry." Grace smiled gently. "After he was gone, I promised myself I'd never walk past someone who needed help. Because once, he didn't walk past me." There was a long silence. Only the clock ticked. Ethan spoke quietly. "So that's why you helped me?" Grace looked at him. "No, Ethan. I helped you because you looked like someone who needed to be seen." He swallowed hard. The words hit deeper than he expected. For years, he had been invisible. But here, in this small cafe, someone finally saw him. As evening fell, Ethan stepped outside. The sky was painted orange and pink. He looked at the town that had turned its back on him, and for once, it didn't feel as heavy. Grace joined him, 2 mugs of hot chocolate in her hands. "Beautiful sunset," she said. "Yeah," he replied quietly. "I didn't think I'd ever notice one again." She smiled. "Then that's a start." They stood side by side, watching the light fade into night. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel like running. He didn't feel lost. He felt human again. The next few weeks passed quietly in Willow Creek. Every morning, Ethan Cole helped Grace Miller open her little cafe by the lake. He would brew coffee, fix shelves, and wipe tables, while Grace served customers with her warm smile. For the first time in months, Ethan laughed again. He smiled. He worked with purpose. People began to notice the change. But so did the whispers. It started one cold morning when 2 women entered the cafe. They looked around and whispered to each other. Ethan recognized one of them, Mrs. Palmer, his old neighbor. When he brought them coffee, they avoided eye contact. "Grace," one of them said loudly, "you know who that man is, right?" Grace looked up, puzzled. "He's Ethan. He helps me here." Mrs. Palmer frowned. "He's trouble. You should stay away before he ruins your cafe too." The word stung. Ethan froze, standing still with the tray in his hands. Grace didn't blink. "I don't believe gossip, Mrs. Palmer. Enjoy your coffee." The women exchanged shocked looks and left soon after. But the damage was done. Later that day, Ethan walked out to the back of the cafe, staring at the quiet lake. The wind was cold, but not colder than the shame creeping inside him. He remembered those same whispers before, the ones that destroyed his life. The ones that made everyone walk away. And now, they had found him again. Grace came outside, wiping her hands on a towel. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, just need some air." She looked at him carefully. "You heard what they said?" He sighed. "It's fine. They're not wrong to think that way. Grace frowned. They are wrong, Ethan. You're not who they say you are. He turned away. You don't know that. Grace stepped closer. I don't need proof to believe in someone. Ethan gave a small, broken laugh. That's your mistake then. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The old voices came back: his boss, his parents, Amanda. You're a liar. You're a failure. You ruin everything you touch. He stared at the ceiling, feeling the same emptiness crawl back. The same loneliness that had crushed him once before. By dawn, he made a decision. He couldn't stay. He packed his bag quietly, folded the blanket Grace gave him, and wrote a small note. Thank you for everything. You deserve peace, not someone like me. He left it on the counter and walked out. Grace found the note an hour later. Her hands shook as she read it. She ran outside, heart pounding, scanning the road. Ethan was gone. She didn't stop to think. She grabbed her coat, locked the cafe, and ran toward the lake trail, the one Ethan often walked when he needed space. The air was sharp with cold. The wind howled through the trees. Finally, she saw him standing near the edge of the water, his bag beside him, staring at the gray sky. Ethan, she shouted. He turned, surprised. Grace? What are you doing here? She stopped in front of him, out of breath. You were just going to leave. He looked down. It's better this way. People will start talking. I'll ruin your name too. Grace stepped closer. Do you think I care about that? You should, he said quietly. You worked hard for that cafe. You don't need my problems. Grace's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. You think you're protecting me, but you're just running again. That's what broke you last time. Ethan's jaw tightened. You don't understand. Yes, I do, she said, tears forming. Because I did the same thing. Ethan stared at her, confused. Grace's voice cracked. After my brother died, I shut everyone out. I thought if I stayed alone, I couldn't lose anyone again. But I was wrong. I lost myself instead. She stepped closer until she was standing right in front of him. You pulled me out of that pain without even knowing it, Ethan. You gave me purpose again. Don't walk away now. Please. He looked at her, the woman who saw hope in him when no one else did. The woman who stayed. Rain started falling again, light at first, then harder. The storm had returned, but this time, it didn't scare him. He dropped his bag and whispered, I don't want to lose you too. Grace's tears mixed with the rain as she smiled. Then don't. They stood there, both crying, both laughing through the storm. And in that moment, Ethan realized something. Maybe life doesn't always give second chances. But sometimes, people do. They walked back to the cafe, soaked to the bone, but lighter in spirit. Grace made tea while Ethan fixed the broken window near the counter. As he worked, she said softly, You're not leaving again, right? He smiled faintly. Not unless you kick me out. She chuckled. That's not happening. That night, as thunder echoed outside, Ethan sat by the window, looking out at the rain. For the first time, the storm didn't remind him of pain, it reminded him of Grace. She was the calm in his chaos, the light in his dark. He whispered to himself. Maybe I wasn't left behind after all. The storm passed, but something new had begun. Every morning, Ethan Cole and Grace Miller opened their cafe together. The smell of coffee filled the small shop, mixing with laughter and sunlight. The wooden sign outside read The Willow Cafe, where no one eats alone. At first, people still whispered when they walked by. Some crossed the street to avoid Ethan. Others came only to watch, curious if he would fail again. But slowly, things changed. One day, a young man entered, shivering from the cold. He had a ripped jacket and empty eyes, the same look Ethan once wore. Grace welcomed him with a warm smile. "Sit. I'll get you something hot." The man hesitated. "I don't have money." Ethan stepped forward and said gently, "Neither did I once." "Don't worry about it." He brought the man a cup of soup and bread. Grace placed her hand on Ethan's shoulder, proud and quiet. That simple act, one meal, one bit of kindness, changed everything. People started noticing. The cafe that once stood empty now began to fill with laughter, stories, and strangers finding warmth. Word spread through Willow Creek. "Ethan Cole? He runs that new cafe with Grace. He helps everyone. He's not what we thought." The same mouths that once whispered hate now spoke in softer tones. One afternoon, Mrs. Palmer, the same neighbor who had warned Grace, walked in nervously. Ethan looked up, surprised. "Mrs. Palmer." She avoided his eyes. "I came for coffee." Grace smiled kindly. "Of course. Sit wherever you like." Ethan served her coffee without a word. When he placed the cup down, she looked at him for a long time. Finally, she said, "I was wrong about you." Ethan nodded slowly. "It's okay. Most people were." Her eyes softened. "I'm glad you stayed, Ethan." For the first time, she smiled, a real one. Days turned into weeks. The cafe walls, once dull and cracked, were now painted a warm cream color. Grace hung photographs of sunsets, handwritten notes, and small drawings made by children who visited. One photo stood out: Ethan and Grace, standing outside the cafe on opening day, both smiling, holding cups of coffee. Underneath it, Grace had written, "Second chances taste like hope." Ethan laughed every time he saw it. "That's so cheesy." Grace grinned. "And yet, it's true." One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Ethan wiped the last table clean. The cafe was empty, soft music playing in the background. Grace came out from the kitchen, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. She handed him one. "You've done a lot here," she said. "You should be proud." He looked around. "It's not just me. It's us." She smiled softly. "Still, I'm glad you stayed." Ethan nodded. "Me too." For a while, neither spoke. The air was peaceful, calm in a way he hadn't felt in years. But peace doesn't last forever. The next morning, a sleek black car stopped outside the cafe. A tall man in a suit stepped out. "Mr. Harris, Ethan's old boss." Grace looked up from the counter. "Do you know him?" Ethan's heart tightened. "Yeah, that's the man who fired me." Mr. Harris walked in, looking around the cafe with surprise. "Ethan, you've built quite a place here." Ethan stood still. "What do you want?" "I came to say something," Mr. Harris said slowly. "We found the real thief. One of the supervisors. You were innocent all along." Ethan blinked, speechless. Mr. Harris continued, "I owe you an apology. And a job. I want you back. We need good men like you in the city." Grace looked at Ethan quietly. Ethan's mind spun. The job he had dreamed about. The life he had lost. It was all being handed back. But this time, it came with a price: leaving Willow Creek. Leaving Grace. He didn't answer right away. He walked outside, standing in the cool air. Grace followed him. "Well," she said softly, "that's quite an offer." He looked down. "It's everything I wanted. A second chance at the life I lost." Grace smiled faintly, though her eyes were heavy. "Then take it, Ethan." He turned to her. "What about the cafe?" "About us." She looked away. "You don't owe me anything. You've already given me enough." He stepped closer. "Grace. But she stopped him with a gentle hand. Go if it's your dream. Don't let me hold you back. Her voice was calm, but her eyes said everything. Please don't go. Ethan swallowed hard. And what if my dream isn't there anymore? She didn't answer. She just smiled, that quiet, kind smile that had saved him once before. He didn't say goodbye. He just whispered, I'll think about it. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The city called him with promises of success. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace's face, the one person who stayed when everyone else walked away. He looked around the cafe, the small place that had become his home. And he realized something. Home wasn't a place. It was a person. The next morning was cold and quiet. Ethan Cole stood by the window of his small room above the cafe, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The offer from Mr. Harris echoed in his head. A fresh start. A better life. Everything he had once dreamed of before everything fell apart. But now, when he imagined that life, he didn't see success. He saw emptiness. A world without Grace Miller. Without the smell of coffee, the sound of laughter, or the soft clink of mugs that had become his rhythm of peace. He sighed and packed his bag anyway. Some part of him needed to face his past to decide for himself, once and for all. When Grace came downstairs, he was waiting by the door. She tried to smile. You're leaving, aren't you? Ethan nodded. I need to see what's out there again. I need to know if I'm ready. Grace nodded slowly. Then go. You deserve to find out who you are. He wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. Instead, Grace handed him a small paper bag. Bread and coffee for the road, she said quietly. Old habits die hard. Ethan smiled sadly. Thank you. For everything. She shook her head. You don't have to thank me, Ethan. Just promise me one thing: don't forget what you've built here. He hesitated, then whispered, I could never forget. And with that, he walked out the door. The city felt bigger than he remembered. Tall buildings, loud horns, people rushing past without a glance. It was the same world that once left him behind. He went to the office where he had worked years ago. Mr. Harris greeted him with a handshake and a proud smile. You belong here, Ethan. We'll make things right this time. The job was good. The money was better. But as the days passed, something inside him began to ache. He missed the quiet mornings by the lake. He missed Grace's voice saying, coffee's ready. He missed the peace that no paycheck could ever buy. One night, after another long day at work, Ethan sat alone in his apartment. The city lights blinked through the window, but he felt nothing. He took out the small paper bag Grace had given him. Inside was a note he hadn't seen before. It read, if the world forgets you again, just remember someone never will. He held the note tightly, his eyes wet. And right then, he knew. He was done running. Snow was falling when Ethan returned to Willow Creek. The streets were quiet, covered in white. The cafe's windows glowed softly in the evening light. He could see Grace inside, wiping the counter, humming a song to herself. He hesitated for a moment, heart pounding. Then he pushed the door open. The little bell above the door chimed, and Grace looked up. For a second, she froze and then her eyes widened. Ethan. He smiled through the cold. Told you I'd think about it? Grace laughed, a tear slipping down her cheek. You came back. He stepped closer. The city had everything I wanted, except one thing. She tilted her head. What's that? You. Her breath caught. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Grace whispered, I knew you'd come back. Ethan smiled softly. You were the only one who didn't leave. How could I? The days that followed were filled with laughter and life. Ethan and Grace reopened the cafe together, brighter and warmer than ever before. They started a new signboard outside that read, "The Willow Cafe, a place for the left behind." People came not for coffee, but for kindness. For warmth. For hope. Some were broken like Ethan once was. Some were lonely like Grace had been. And every single one found something waiting inside a home that didn't ask for explanations, only hearts willing to heal. One afternoon, Ethan stood by the window, watching snow fall on the lake. Grace came up beside him, 2 mugs of hot chocolate in her hands. "You still think about leaving?" she asked playfully. He shook his head. "No, I already found what I was looking for." She smiled. "And what was that?" Ethan looked at her with quiet eyes. "A reason to stay." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then stay forever." He smiled. "Forever sounds perfect."